This is the most important time of fantasy football because it's almost too late to create an absolute super team on your bench that can help you win a championship. Lucky for you guys, I'm going to be giving you a list of the players that will win us leagues off of the waiver wire that we can add this week that will turn into league winners or some short-term upside plays you can play in the meantime with bye weeks and injuries. And to make this video useful for everybody, I have a list at the end of the video of players that should already be added in your league, but maybe they're not, but maybe you're just in a smaller league. There's a whole bunch of reasons, but stick around to the end of the video for that. But you guys know the number one thing I hate the most is wasting people's time, so let's get into it with the very first player we need to be adding off the waivers. By all means, this week is Dell, and I'll go over it pretty quickly because he should be rostered, but I need to talk about him. And he's only rostered in just over 50% of leagues, so he should be available for most of you guys. But in the beginning of the season, he started out pretty good, and I was telling you guys we really don't need to be picking him up yet. And then he dealt with injury and had a couple disappointing weeks, but now is the time to buy in for real. He had 6 targets, over 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns last week. An amazing game all around. Outside of the game-winning touchdown on that last drive, he had a lot of very valuable targets. They weren't just throwaway passes. He was relied on third downs and pretty trusted all around in this offense. He was first in snaps amongst everybody on the roster. He ran the most routes and he earned the most targets, all around the best wide receiver this week. All signs that this really isn't a one-hit wonder game. And the great thing about him and really all of these pass catchers in this offense is that CJ Stroud is going to continue to have a pass-heavy attack. The only drawback you can have with this ad is that CJ Stroud threw for just shy of 500 yards and 5 touchdowns. That is not going to continue regularly, but he still has high passing volume. He's very likely to average over 30 pass attempts and around 300 passing yards a game, which is still pretty high. There was no Robert Woods in this matchup, which did elevate Dell into the wide receiver 2 slot behind Nico Collins. Even though he really acted like the wide receiver 1, he got more usage because of that. But that doesn't mean we can't throw a waiver claim at Dell, which is a wide receiver that had one of the most points last week. And if anything, we can just use him as a trade piece, put him with another guy, sell him as a package to get an upgrade. And if you guys are still watching this video and haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do that while you're already locked into this information. It helps me out a ton, but you guys have been going absolutely crazy. We are at 5K subs already. That is all glory to you guys. Give yourself some credit. Shout out to you guys. But the next guy we need to be adding off the waivers is a tight end in Cade Otton. This is a guy that came out and saw 9 targets, 70 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Is that inflated because of how much this offense was moving and how high scoring this game in total was? Yes, it was, but that does not make him a bad tight end option, and let me explain why. He's been getting great target volume since his bye week. If you look at his chart here, 7 target average over the past 3 weeks, and he's on the field running routes on almost 100% of the plays, which is very uncommon for tight ends that aren't named Mark Andrews or Travis Kelce. Last week, he ran over 90% of the routes, which led him to a 15% team target share, which again, for tight ends is pretty high. If you guys like more of the statistics, that puts him right outside the top 5 for tight ends, and this is a great long-term league winning play as well as a short-term play as well. But he has a great playoff schedule and remaining schedule, top 5 for tight ends again. He's only rostered in 10% of leagues. He should be an easy add this week because a lot of people are dealing with injuries and bye weeks, especially to the tight end position. And a lot of people's favorite part of these videos is when I talk about the running backs. So one guy that we can get maybe in deeper leagues, or maybe if you just want to secure him now, is Chandler. He's the backup to Alexander Mattison and Cam Akers. But Cam Akers has dealt with an injury that is going to get him out for the entirety of the season. It's really unfortunate that it happened because he was looking like a great running back. But that puts Chandler as the number 2 RB behind Alexander Mattison. And he was the backup behind Mattison before they signed Cam Akers. He was averaging around a 20% snap share. Didn't really get too much, mostly because they wanted to see what they had with Mattison and gave him a good amount of work. And then they signed Cam Akers when they realized they don't really want to go that workhorse RB role. But Chandler is a super fast and quick running back. He ranked in the 98th percentile of speed, and he could be a very important change of pace back alongside Alexander Mattison, who isn't that fast and that dynamic. Unless they go through and sign some other running back, I don't see a world where we can't sign him. He was great throughout the preseason. He had a role. He's been in this offense for a little while now. I could see him getting up to a 40% snap share, but it is going to take a couple weeks for that to happen. You don't need to pick him up this week, but if you want to secure him now and you think your league is really competitive and there isn't much room for getting an advantage over other managers, you can go ahead and pick him up now, but it's something to keep an eye on for the future weeks. Another guy I love is Zay Jones, and this could very well be a league winner, with a disclaimer that he doesn't land back on IR. At the moment, he's not slated to, but it's very possible that he could. If he does, we're just going to leave him on the waivers another couple of weeks and then pick him up after. Either way, he's going to be added in our leagues, whether it's this week or 2 weeks from now. But Zay Jones is the wide receiver 2 or 3. He posed a real threat to Calvin Ridley's usage in the beginning of the season before he got injured. And in week 1, he had a 23% team target share. In week 2, he had a 19% team target share. And that was only only while playing 60% of the snaps in that week 2 game. He was still very, very used before his injury. It will be interesting to see how this team operates when Zay Jones comes back in terms of wide receivers that they use, because a lot of the times you can't really play 3 wide receiver sets every single down. But Jones will be locked and loaded into at least a 70% snap share. That is not going to change. We can't forget that he was an absolute breakout at the end of last season. He still has that potential and is that same player. It's just going to take some time for him to come back, and then we'll see what he looks like. Worst case scenario, you get him off the waivers, he comes back, he doesn't have that much of a role, and you drop him anyways. But best case scenario, we have him, we stash him, he becomes a great wide receiver too. We can sell him high or keep him on our roster. So make sure to go through and add him once we get more information on his injury. If he goes on IR, we can wait a few weeks, but if not, we can grab him now. But if you guys again are in a bit of a deeper league, Khalil Shakir is another guy that you need to keep on your fantasy football radar, probably for the more short term though. It's always good to have a player in a really high powered offense like the Bills, and he's been increasing his snap share every single week, so we need to keep an eye out for him. The Bills really never had a wide receiver 3 outside of Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis, and Gabe Davis really can't be trusted anyways. Last week he had 2 targets, 0 receptions, 0 fantasy points, and Khalil Shakir just saw back-to-back games with over a 65% snap share. And the reason we weren't going through and adding him last week is because I wanted to see how his snap share and usage would continue to be, and it's continued to be decent enough to have him on our roster. And most of the reason why his snaps are increasing is probably because of the injury to Dawson Knox. But other wide receivers not named Diggs or Gabe Davis took a massive hit in snap percentage and usage, while Khalil Shakir went way up. But again, he outperformed Gabe Davis, who only had 2 targets. He is a bit more of a boom bust guy, and maybe Khalil Shakir can make his way into that more secure, consistent target getter. I mean, he's averaged 5 targets over the past 2 weeks, but he is a great short-term play in a flex spot or maybe a deeper league until Dawson Knox comes back. We can still keep him, but let's see how his snap share rules out when Knox is back to see if that's really the only reason he's getting more snaps. But while he's out, he's a great add. And you guys know I love to talk about some defenses we can stream off the waivers, because if you guys aren't streaming defenses and you don't have one like the Cowboys or the 49ers, it is a great idea. Defense streaming is really just when you target matchups every single week and pick defenses that go against terrible offenses like the Bears, or teams that give up a lot of defensive points and sacks like the Commanders. So the first team we need to be grabbing off the waiver wire to start this week is the Colts defense. And the main reason for this is because the overseas games this year have been pretty choppy, and I understand why. After all, these players in the NFL are actual humans. Jet lag does exist. There's a whole bunch of reasons that could go into why these games are a bit slower, but it is real and it is a thing that we need to know. So that could and has proven to keep these games a little bit less high scoring, and they also get a matchup against the Patriots, who are not a good offense by any means. Don't think their matchup against the Commanders had them looking like a good offense. The Commanders let everybody score against them. But speaking of the Commanders, if the Colts are already taken or you just don't like them, you can go through and grab the Seahawks, who get the Commanders in a matchup this week, and they are a fantasy point funnel. They allow some of the most points to opposing wide receivers over the top. Even running backs, quarterbacks, everybody is a positive in this matchup, and it definitely does not help that they lost Chase Young and Montez Sweat, who really helped this D-line. Sam Howell has been sacked over 40 times, the most in the NFL. There is a lot of opportunities for sacks for the Seahawks defense, and when Sam Howell is dropping back 40 times to pass a game, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for more sacks, but also interceptions and other turnovers. But as promised, this is a list of the players we need to be getting off the waiver wire and just making sure they're not still available, because if they are, they should be your number 1 priorities. And we're going to go through this rapid fire. Number 1 is Sam Howell. He's only rostered in 60% of leagues. I don't understand how this team is going to pass a lot. Their defense is not good. They are forced to have a lot of passing volume. Pat Freiermuth is another guy that's been dropped in so many leagues. The number 1 reason for this is because he has been injured and hasn't played in a while. When he does start to come back, we can go ahead and pick him up. He's not rostered in very many leagues at all, but he is a very integral part of this offense. Go ahead and get him before he comes back. Doesn't have to be this week, but keep an eye on him. If you haven't, go get Kyler Murray. He is a top 10 fantasy quarterback when fully healthy and in the full swing of things. It might take him a week to get fully acclimated back into this offense, but he should be back and going this week. If you can go ahead and stash him on your bench before he starts scoring fantasy points and gets in the news, you can either sell him way higher than you got him for off the waivers, or you can start him as a good fine fantasy option for yourself. Go get Chuba Hubbard as well. He's rostered in about 70% of leagues, depending on what format you are in. Again, if you're in smaller leagues or you just have some incompetent managers in your fantasy league, you can go get him. You should go get him. He's been named the RB1 for the Panthers. He saw 15 plus carries in back-to-back games. Johnny Smith is another tight end that should be rostered already. He saw 6 targets for 100 yards and a touchdown last week. Is some of that inflated because there was no Drake London? Most definitely yes, but if Arthur Smith continues to use him at the goal line more than Bijan and gets him involved the same amount as Kyle Pitts, he should be rostered just in case. I don't think he's a great tight end option, but if you need a fill-in guy, he's a fine one. But speaking of good tight end options, go get Dalton Schultz if you haven't already. I know he just came off a big game again because of the CJ Stroud masterclass he just put on with almost 500 passing yards. Same idea here with Tank Dell. Yes, he's not going to pass 500 yards a game, but he's still a very pass-heavy quarterback in a pass-heavy scheme. There's going to be offense. There's going to be opportunities. Dalton Schultz is a tight end we should have on our team. If Zach Charbonnet is still available in waivers, go stash him, especially if you need a running back for late season. He's been increasing his snaps. He's been increasing his usage. Is he going to overtake Kenneth Walker? Most definitely not, but he still very well could have a role. You might look at his performance and say there's absolutely no reason why we should be picking him up. He only had 4 carries, but the reality of it is none of the Seahawks had any carries. It was a very pass-heavy game because they were getting blown out by the Ravens. Kenneth Walker only had 9 carries, so it's really not that much of a difference in the run volume. When the Seahawks are down in games and they're playing from behind, Zach Charbonnet is the guy they kind of use for a change of pace back. He is the better receiving back, or at least will be in the long term of the season. Don't panic on Kenneth Walker though, but JSN is another guy we need to already have added onto our team if he's still on the waivers. He had a consistent target share throughout the entirety of the season. He saw 82% of the snaps last week, a season high. Is that because of the blowout? Probably, but that does mean that he is trusted at least somewhat. The Seahawks also have one of the easiest schedules for fantasy wide receivers, so that could be helpful for you as well. That is going to finish off the video of all of the waiver ads we need to be making. Make sure to have your post notifications on because I am going to be dropping a video of the traps that are on the waiver wire tomorrow. You don't want to miss that. Stay ahead of the game. I'll see you guys in that video.